This conference will now be recorded.
Well, it isn't. All right, we can get started here.
No, we're waiting on Brad. All right. Did anybody else want coffee?
Yeah, more coffee?
No. Good.
He's got one man standing there, like, I don't know, right? Yeah, wait. Yes, let's do it.
All right. We'll call the work session order 8:03. Please silence your cell phones and stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comment or Michael?
That was a result of our union negotiations last week with Commissioner Krause.
Pardon?
The hole in the wall was a result of our union negotiations.
Oh, nice.
Brian, you shouldn't get so bad.
Yeah. Yes. Did it help?
Not
Did the hole in the wall help the negotiations?
Yeah, I'd like to think so, at least.
We got our point across anyway.
Well, there we go. Bring the hammer, guys, bring the hammer.
So I don't, this will be a meandering conversation, and I think will be helpful for me because we need a few minutes at least to just go different directions and talk about perhaps a lot of different things, not following any one specific theme other than budget, obviously. We didn't get into this much. I just introduced it in last week's conversation, so I want to come back here as you've had it with you for a week, and maybe you've pondered it, maybe you haven't. If not, we have some time to peek at least what the iterative changes were from the 726 version that you had. And again, that looks like this old format. So just kind of quickly looking over on this left-hand side, which on the general fund side, where there was a lot more detail, but a lot of detail that doesn't necessarily mean anything to you from a consumer. So the effort was to consolidate a lot of these lines at the department level into a more readable fashion, which is what this revised form does. So as you would talk about, interpret, or reference in your mind a specific department, this tries to capture all things happening at that department level, so you don't have to add 5 or 6 lines together to get an understanding of what's going on. If you'd like to see any additional changes, please ask. This is more for your consumption than it is mine. So if it isn't helpful, then it's pointless to have in this form. So please be ready and willing with anything. Like, I don't like that way, let's do it this way. Happy to do that, just let me know. The additional legends being added, indicating reserve funds, we're going to talk about those today, indicating changes from previous version with the yellow highlight. And then that on the back side of the page you had, but just going up here, the yellow highlights, the notes, I should say, referencing the yellow highlights, tying to the yellow highlights about what changed from the 726 version to the 731 version in this particular case. So all departments, naming convention, consolidation changes, and color changes as referenced. And then transferring in $100,000 of LETCF funds that, if you recall from a few meetings ago, was part of the sell, if you will, for bringing on the community coordinator position. I needed a place to spend those dollars anyway, and it tied nicely with the ability to offset staff wages there, that position wages, for a little more than a year and a half. Fund 1, HRA, I didn't move this under the appropriations. I left it as a separate line, and that's okay. It's like it's an appropriation and it's not, because we are part of a multi-county collaborative, which warrants some more conversation sometime in the near future, probably. We do not have unless something changes in the near future, we do not have a full levy commitment for 2025 to the multi-county HRA. In previous years, for many years, it's been roughly $86,000. That after all of the bonds were cleared up, this last year, 2024 will be that final year where we'll have a full levy commitment. This $5,500 is our apportioned amount of a $50,000 administrative ask. So the HRA is basically saying, please appropriate by the sum total parts of your counties $50,000, of which $5,500 would be receive the county's apportioned part. So that is the only placeholder.
I have one quick question for you that I have had all along. I'm interested in how that conversation fits with our housing trust fund.
So am I. We've had representation at our housing trust fund meetings from the HRA, which is a necessary integration, I think. But I have the exact same questions.
And I think they provided originally with the thought that the HRA would contribute to the housing trust fund. They're not in a position to do that.
No, and I don't know when they would be or how they would be.
No, and I don't think they will be. But the HRA does work as our funding mechanism for HUD dollars to flow to Waseca County to the tune of over $20,000 a month.
Yes.
To our landlords who are renting to these people. So I don't know how that fits into the picture.
Yeah, it's a great question, and certainly one that's percolated in my mind to need to be solved in the future. We don't even yet know what the final funding allotment will be through LHTF, which is a necessary question to answer as well, not one for us to answer, but for an answer to be provided. Yeah.
I wasn't at the last HRA meeting, but the last I was there, this was a proposed number. Did you guys talk about it more at the last meeting, this 5,500?
It hasn't been settled. No, there was no vote taken on it. It's just, we might as well stick it in there so that we've got at least a placeholder. Because it is evident. In fact, we didn't even have final account balances yet from the end of 2023. That was coming as soon as we had the auditor's report. I think we made some big strides in getting the accounting firm on board that knows HRAs, and the financials we saw felt a lot more solid, but they're still waiting on audited numbers from 23 to solidify fund balances.
Okay.
Once we do that, then I think then those conversations are gonna have to happen in pretty short order. But of course, they're in a different fiscal year than we are too.
Not on the calendar year.
I believe so.
Yeah, so the 5,500, to your point, is, well, I guess it's on the notes there too, came from that March 2024
Yeah.
letter. The,
Yep.
Operating deficit agreement, or whatever it's called.
Yes, which has not been passed or.
Nope, so that is truly for 2024, so it's fair point, could change. It's the best that we know right now. The city is interested in continuing to be in the LHTF conversations. They reached out to me a week and a half ago from the perspective of senior housing, wondering if local housing trust fund is interested in those conversations. We have a developer contact that has some interest in that development space in the city and or county. So all that to say that the city will continue to be present there. The more time we can give to HRA and local housing trust funds, et cetera, so we aren't having the same conversations multiple times.
Another question there then. We haven't had a meeting there either, have we, since the last one I was at? I'm not getting any email updates.
Trust fund, you're saying?
Last.
The last one was on that
weeks ago.
Was longer than that.
Yeah, I think it was a month ago. Last one I was at.
I don't know if you were at the last one that I was at.
See, I don't even know, I'm sure I didn't even get, she's not very good about reminders or even invites
No,
to go to those. I missed a couple because I don't get anything.
I'll check with Corinna. I'll check in with her.
I don't get them either. I found out about the last one because Tina happened to get invited, so.
Yeah, she's got to get better about keeping it on the radar.
Yeah,
John Froke, the new city planner, will be participating in those conversations too.
And at that last one then, was there any more talk about this development down here? Or is that the one you're talking about with the city?
So, which one, Marketplace? Yeah, so that's where I was going next. The Marketplace conversation was updated the end of last week. I will be going, and I was gonna chat with Commissioner Milbreath about this, but now's a good time too. We were asked to come to the EDA meeting tomorrow if available. I'll be there regardless for the city at noon tomorrow. REF, WERF will be giving a presentation and an update on what that funding shortfall is. And they were able to narrow that gap considerably, but there's still about a $500,000 gap from what the local lenders are willing to finance the TIF for. Their estimated increment raised over the course of the district, I think, was a little more than 1.6 million. But the bank will fund a portioned percentage of that as a guarantee. So whatever shortfall is there. So in very rough numbers, they're willing to finance float 1.1 of the assumed 1.6 being raised. So they calculate their own risk and underwriting. Will the district really exist for 20 years? Will all of the increment be raised, et cetera? So the leftover amount is what REF is pursuing city EDA, county EDA for potential partnership on. And it probably would be a combination of all of those parties if the county is interested in entertaining that. So if you are available tomorrow, awesome. If not the end of the world. But
Where's that meeting at?
just City Hall. Okay. Yeah. So I'll be there regardless. I think the city is just looking for some partnership possibility on that Marketplace project. The hold that the Waseca Real Estate Fund has on it expires in September. So in theory, it would go back out to market if their first right of refusal isn't acted upon in the near future. So REF is trying to push it forward as well in that timing to get something done. The city's trying to push it forward to get something done. I think I will gently allude to some of the political pressures at the city level and how that ties to an election this year and how that potentially derails projects that have been put in place. Read between the lines there. So the city is motivated at the moment to expedite things as much as possible on many fronts, not just the Marketplace property, because they have a resolution in place as of now that denotes and dedicates some funding to this project, Gator Lake development, and others. So their hope is some forward progress, a lot of forward progress in the next 4 months. So that's part of the motivation there. But that gap down to $500,000, which is still a lot, obviously, but it's better than the $1 million it was at. So they were able to generate some additional funds through that real estate fund, some additional commitments from their investing pool. So that'll be the ask. So if you have time, Awesome. We can connect more on that too if you want later. Chris Kennelly is supposed to be reaching out to me. Haven't heard from him yet, just to touch base ahead of that meeting. As part of that Wasika Real Estate Fund. Because that, my ask was, what is the ask? You know, if the county is there, you know, we're not really gonna get put on the spot for something. It's easy to say, yes, we're willing to pursue partnership or collaboration on this project, without committing any specific dollar amount. And I'm not going tomorrow to commit any specific dollar amount, but it would be good for us to have that in mind. With, if 500,000 is the number, and there's 4 parties that are essentially petitioning 2 organizations. Is it as simple as $125,000 per organization? Does the county board have more expectations, different expectations on that from a development standpoint, economic development standpoint? There's a pool of money currently with the Wasika County EDA, $250,000. It's been talked about, scoped as revolving loan fund. It isn't exclusively revolving loan fund. That's just the cash balance, the fund balance that they have. As I said, we'll get into some fund balance conversations as well this morning. Keep that in mind, please, as we move through this conversation, and if that adds to insights that you can offer for tomorrow's conversation, all the better as well. Anything else on that? So going back to this summary, were there any immediate takeaways, questions you had, concerns you had? Why did we do it this way and not this way? I did up the Min Prairie amount. I had like a 1.5% placeholder in there initially. I bumped that up to 4.6 change, just where that conversation has been trending. Could come back down.
That's probably realistic. But I still haven't seen the audit. Have you seen the audit?
Yeah.
Did that get sent out to us?
I'm pretty sure it did.
But like you said too, we do have money from last year, and I believe we'll be getting some money this year to buy that down if we want.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. We had talked about Fund 19 changes a couple of meetings ago. Those were already integrated into the 726 plan, but were different from the original presentation that the county engineer provided to you. So we got a little bit more aggressive on the commodity sales and the commensurate revenue. So we increased the revenue and also decreased an expense. So it helped that budget out quite a bit in a realistic way, and I would say probably still in a conservative way, assuming the unknowns, trying to factor in the unknowns that we don't know what the actual commodity sales will be, what the price of cardboard will be. So I think we're well within reason there. There still is the placeholder in this budget for building improvements, that's $750,000. Still continue to factor that in to the overall program, as we have, this will be the 3rd year that is happening. So continuing to keep that in mind as we move forward in building conversations, jail conversations, justice center conversations, which I'm hoping we can come back to in the near future based upon the board's preference there. But it would be helpful from a staffing standpoint to be able to at least provide some perspective for people of where are we going over the next couple of years. Even if that's nowhere, that's still an answer. It's like, we're not doing anything. I can still communicate and plan around we're not doing anything. But something is helpful in that narrative to move us forward from a planning standpoint. I had a department head meeting last week, and we'll get into the fund balance conversation here now, but the ask I had of them was, please sit down and think through the next 2 years, what those capital infrastructure items will be, those capital asset items will be. mentioned that to you at our last meeting, what those one-time or one-time and long-time expenses are, and see what makes sense to expedite or front load. Utilizing the additional revenues we have coming from 2023, the additional revenues we'll have in 2024. And how do we provide some levy stabilization a couple of years into the future by moving some of those expenses up where it makes sense. I was expecting Jim to be ready with the list, and he was, of course, but heard from a couple of other people there, and some of that wish list will get discussed at the subcommittee as well, I'm sure. But these are things that he's already programming out. He is an intuitive planner, but over the next 5 years, so he really looked over his 5-year plan and said, what are the larger things that we're anticipating? One thing I did tell him to pursue, which this will probably be the piece that comes to the subcommittee anyway, is trading in the excavator that they have, which they can't really use because it's enormous. And when that was purchased, that was discussed at the point of purchase. That was, I think, just before I was getting here. But there was some disagreement in-house there with the size of the machine that we're buying, and then, okay, now we have to find a trailer to haul this thing because we don't have any way to get it anywhere. And even when we do get it there, we can't get it down in any of the ditches we want it to work in. So it's pretty ineffective. So they're looking to trade that in and purchase something that will actually be useful to them and can assist with the projects they have. The difference in that is about $65,000 based upon the value of the machine we have, age and hours on it, and the trade-in value. The cash difference is about $65,000. That was an easy one in my mind to try to move up in the current program. So he was talking about the excavator. He was talking about a crack seal machine. Cat backhoe. Oh, that was the backhoe trade-in. Maybe it was a backhoe or excavator. Backhoe. Thank you. That was too big.
The tractor backhoe.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's that.
Look at the tractor.
That's right. That's just a German tank down in a ditch.
Too large.
Pretty much.
Have they considered a mini?
Well, that's what I was wondering. Do we have anything that they can reach and dig out just road ditches, with a wider bucket?
No, that's what they're trying to accomplish.
Would get a mini to do something like that.
Yeah, so I talked to the mechanic some. He didn't say mini, but it was more of the medium. It wasn't the smallest version, but it was.
Well, minis are.
Yeah, maybe a little tongue in cheek.
Well, the one that Chris bought, that would be about right.
Yeah,
Okay,
to me, yeah.
that's right.
But I think they still want the rubber tractor wheel style so they can not have to turn it all the time, right? They get in the general area, they're able to just drive it there.
Yeah.
Instead of.
As opposed to a tractor.
So they just have the one tractor backhoe
Right,
and go smaller.
and go small, that's what they used to have.
That would make perfect sense because the big one didn't make any sense.
Do you know, and I don't recall this, did they ever upgrade their snow blower for the front of
No,
I'm not aware of that happening.
that was one thing we didn't let them do.
We eliminated the source of the snow blower pain. Elsewhere.
The amount of times, or were you kind of wondering if they shouldn't have one?
Yeah.
The amount of times we were using it, it wasn't cost effective, and we were better off to hire it out.
So of the 5 items he had sent me, 2 of them are not factored into his 5-year plan. The others are. The This is why the excavator was stuck in my head. He has a Cat 315 excavator with attachments, currently not in our inventory or program for purchase and 5-year plan. We have the trailer for the size of the machine. This is what he's talking about, used for ditch cleaning, tree, debris removal, culvert repairs, etc. Crack seal machine, which is $110,000. This machine is currently not in our inventory or program for the purchase of the 5-year plan. We currently rent annually. The machine is in high demand by other agencies, and we're limited to annual seal cost program mileage before we need to send it back. We could do more miles of crack sealing in the spring, fall if we owned a machine, which is a preventative maintenance strategy for extending the life of our pavements. Depending on the dollars available, this is essentially tied for top priority in his mind. Cat backhoe trade-in, currently programmed for 2027. Current machine is Bruce Ferguson special with too large of backhoe, which makes unstable and unsafe to some extent. Continue to blow seals on the triggers, or excuse me, on the outriggers due to the weight of the hoe, and we filled the front tires with beet juice to try to keep tires on the ground.
That's gotta go.
Heavy in the back end, so that was popping wheelies all the time.
Right. Yeah. So then he mentions the Cat 950 payloader, currently planning to trade in our Volvo in 2026. Dollars are available. We'd like to keep the Volvo and move it to Janesville, plus purchase the Cat 950 for Waseca. Allows us to use the Volvo for snow pushback at intersection in Janesville and Waldorf area, and load trucks quicker in Janesville. The Cat 950 for loading at Waseca shop, gravel pits in summer, and snow pushback in Waseca in the Bridgeland area. It says Janesville can house the machine in heated space in the winter. Last thing was a road groomer, $25,000. This equipment is currently not in our inventory. Towed behind a tractor of HD pickup to smooth gravel roads faster than a motor grader. Does not replace a motor grader, but would allow for quick coverage and high volume gravel roads, especially prior to weekends, etc. if rain events occurred timely. So, quick run through of those. The one other thing we talked about was the flat roof replacement on that building. We know that's anticipated in the next 2 years, based upon that conversation with Ortel before. That would be estimated around $200,000 for that. So that would be something worth considering as well too, that we already know we will be paying for one way or the other over the next couple of years. It's about 25 years old now. Worth considering there too.
200,000 was estimated for that roof hole redo, flat part.
We have not got a bid on it, but
Right, that'd be his,
on a square footage basis, that's what.
it's been looked into several times.
Yep, it's been repaired a few times, hasn't been replaced as we know. So more can come on that, but getting into the rationale of the conversation as a whole, I had included for you, I must have closed that, bear with me a second. I had included in that budget forecast for you some language about reserves and where some of this methodology is coming from, and that I'll pull that up here in a sec.
We got it on the 17th of July.
So when we're talking fund balances, in 2022, our audited financial statements considered a 39.12% fund balance. So when anytime we look at our audit, there's a series of funds broken out into general revenue, and they look at the assigned and the unassigned balance compared to the real the actual year expenses in the general fund, and then calculate a reserve based upon that. Obviously, both of those things change every year, what we actually need to spend, and there can be some artificial inflators or deflators in that every single year. And the amount of reserve balance shifts every single year based upon the actuals, revenues versus expenditures as well too. So all that to say that 39.12% was the calculated reserve balance for the general fund in our 2022 audited financial statements, okay? So we didn't hear that presentation until about October last year. We were getting very close to finishing it as of the end of last week. Had a couple of things that we're still looking into, but hopefully within, well, this month will be ambitious, but by the first month of September, I'm hoping Baker Tilly will be here to present the 2023 findings. That 40%, as you're all aware, is somewhat of that magic number as we look at Office of State Auditor's magic number. We have probably varying thoughts on what that number should be.
And has that went up in the last couple of years? I thought it used to always be about 35 or 33.
It's gone from 35 to 42. Really what they would suggest as a target is more like 42 now. I just keep latching on to the 40%.
Okay.
They tweak it with inflation, but really it's a rolling calculation based upon what we were just discussing, the actual activity that happens in a given year. So it's a target, but GFOA has never deviated from their 18% in the history of the organization. So they just keep saying 18%, which assumes more so that, well, your budget's already going to be changing with inflation anyway.
Right.
So we don't need to get real cute in how we calculate this. So they just kind of say that 2 to 3 months of float is adequate for general governments. So GFOA has always maintained that. OSA has changed over the years. That 35% you mentioned was realistic in their mind a few years ago and closer to 42% now. But that being said, that's why we talk about both of them. There's obviously a gap in that 2 to 3 months versus the 4 to 6 month equation, and where we fall in that. As we know, we're closer to the 40% than the 18%. Over the last couple of years, that's been helpful for us in many ways, but particularly from the investment piece, as you see more down at the bottom, and what aggressiveness we've been able to maintain and implement there over the last 2 years to the tune of millions of dollars in interest earnings through the end of this year. But looking at 2024, I was estimating on here that we will reflect closer to 46% general fund balance. We did get the estimation from Amanda at Baker Tilly end of last week, and agreeing with that synopsis of 45.89%. So right at that anticipated 46%, as I mentioned in your forecast, which is helpful in my mind because it means I'm looking at the same data that they're looking at, because it's a little convoluted when you look through the actual audited financial statements. They consolidate a lot of information in one line item. So really between these assigned and unassigned lines here, that's not helpful. Assigned and unassigned balance, if you just follow the math through here, total fund balance, page 3, 9.5 million. General fund expenditures, the actual expenditure activity that they saw in 2023 of 18.1 million. The assigned and unassigned fund balances only, which is this 5.8 and the 2.5 right above there. And if you're looking at the forecast, you see 2022's version of this as well, this same chart I referenced. This is the proposed draft 2023. So the 8.33 divided by these 18.16 is just what's giving you that result at 46%. Okay. What we do not have here yet, but what I mentioned on your forecast is what do we assume when we expand that logic into more than just the general fund? The general fund reserve balance is always what we talk about. That's great. That's the bulk of our operation, but it doesn't include things like public works. So there are certainly some outliers. So we're truly our largest budgetary impact as a county, public works isn't even included in that general fund picture. So they also calculate, Baker Tilly also calculates a reserve when you consider some of those special revenue funds. So as I put on here, they clarify, and even from the GFOA language, Minnesota Office of State Auditor recommends unrestricted fund balance of no less than 5 months, 41.7, that's where they're at today, that 42% of operating expenditures for general fund and special revenue funds. So they clarify in their language that you don't necessarily need a general fund reserve balance of 42%. You need a reserve balance of 42%, inclusive of special revenue funds. That isn't really, I shouldn't say how any county is treating this, but the vast majority of counties are not treating it that way, nor have we ever treated it that way. We look at general fund as general fund, and that's even how it's reported in our audited financial statements pretty universally across the state. Here's your general fund balance.
And so what would be in the special revenue?
Good question. That's where we're going to go next.
Okay.
So when we just look at our reserve amounts in general, we'll step through this and give the appropriate clarifications where needed. So effectively, this is going to be everything that you wouldn't see in that general fund balance. So if we back up, and I should have brought a copy of this just for clarification, but you have a copy or it's on the website. If you look in the 2022 audited financial statements, down towards the bottom of that section of the chart you see in your forecast, it talks about an agency-wide balance. I can't remember what language they use, but it's about 67%. So they say, okay, if we back up and we look at other funds that could be utilized if they needed to be, the reserve balance is more like 67% instead of the 39.12%. That doesn't even go as far as we could go. That wouldn't go into like the public works assigned funds that we've discussed. So, you know, as of really, this is really the end of July in terms of what these balances are. So I just went through them and identified, here's currently what the cash balance or assigned balance is, what we know is committed out of those funds for either our current year or the 2025 program as it exists now, and then what the remaining balance would be. It doesn't consider additions to the funds in the current year, but if there have been some year to date, they would already be in there. But when we look at local option sales tax or wheelage, usually we're doing one transaction to move that to an assigned balance a year. So there would be some additional dollars coming into those. We have to give a couple of caveats that even though there's a balance in some of these things, we know like local option sales tax has a defined project area. It's not as though we can just capture those dollars and build a building with them. So we have to have a little bit of clarification and caveat needed. But as you work through all of these things, ultimately you get down to the fact that we still have a $10 million reserve balance, if you will, in consideration of all of our other assigned, unassigned fund balances, special revenue balances. So 25 is a special revenue fund at OR code. So you add that to the $18 million and essentially you're sitting at 100% reserved, not a 42% reserve. Using rough math, that's a little more than 101%. I think if you actually calculate that up. That being said, you would, in fairness, have to come back and consider how that's being applied. It's not like you could just grab that $10 million and use it for anything. Some of these have assignments. Some of them are truly unassigned, meaning they're liquid, if you will. We could spend them today if we had to. So just walking through some of that list, you see the public works accounts at the top there. Just approved that cold storage building to be built out of those funds that are sitting there, still obviously a healthy balance there. Some of these you likely will never have heard of, and truthfully, I had to investigate some of these specifically, like where did this come from and why is it there? And in some cases, the answer is I don't know. It was created at some point in the past and sat there, and so pre-2016, when it was still a county coordinator model, all individual departments were beholden to themselves. So there were a lot of little pools and pockets of money sitting at department levels that we're still seeing a result of. Many of them have already been cleaned up, but there's still some, and they're not huge dollars, but there's still some pockets of those things sitting out there as a result, and that's really the byproduct of what you're seeing. There's still a few dollars in CARES monies. I mentioned this to you early on in this process. I had those budgeted for 2023 activity. I never ended up moving them because it would have just been moving one reserve to another, so I just left it there. Because obviously the general fund did not need it for 2023. So all it would have accomplished is moving $300,000 more into the reserve of the general fund rather than leaving it in the special revenue fund. So I just left it there. The writing was already on the wall for where that general fund was trending. So there are still some available dollars there. Our American Rescue Plan Act dollars that started at about 3.4 million. So over the course of 3 years, we've spent 1.2, 1.3 down. I put this commitment of $1 million, considering our round 9 agreement, a potential round 10 agreement, and a $250,000 placeholder for the EDA as well. So still disposable funds there for certainty. LATCF, I mentioned that $150,000. I put that as committed because I'm going to spend those down between 2025 and 2026 to offset the community coordinator role. Opioid dollars, $181,000. We actually got, probably 5 or 6 payments as well last week. Smaller disbursements as well. So money just kind of keeps coming from unexpected places on that one.
Have you been able to get a hold of the task force and some of that to utilize some of that money for them?
Yes, absolutely. I will. I mean, I have that placeholder in my budget for opioid. Yes, it doesn't hit the actual program for 2025, but I mentioned that piece to Sarah at least.
Tell me about this.
Each agency within Wassaiga County, we're part of the South Central Task Force.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fee, as you might say, to belong to that each year.
Okay.
That either the county and all the cities have to pay, except for Walmart. It's about, I think the cities in the Waseca City and Waseca County pay $12,000.
Okay.
And Janesville and New Richland pay $5,000 to belong to this.
Okay. Yep.
And that would be a very good use of that money as to coordinate and help control the opiate population up front.
Yep.
I know some of it looks, you gotta use something for the backside, and then we're also using it at the school here for United Way, I believe, because that's.
Youth Mental Health Navigator.
Yep. Yep.
So it help countywide is what I'm looking at, not
Absolutely.
just here, at the county level.
No, absolutely.
You know,
And
reference cities.
I believe, prevention is part of the requirement for that, for how you use that money. And I think public safety falls in there. I mean, that's the only issue, is looking down the list and making sure we can do it that way. For sure. I absolutely agree.
So I do still have that expense in the sheriff's budget itself too, that can just as easily be removed. Thank you for that reminder. I'll come back up the list. The one that surprised me more than anyone, honestly, was this one. Because in the past, I was provided a different number, and then I followed up on this one again and said, are you sure it's this number? Are you really sure it's this number? So the amount I had been operating off of was really just the amount that was returned, which was $2,900. You may have heard that amount before in terms of Veterans Memorial. So this one was surprising to me because of current conversations happening in and around Waldorf as well, with some attempts of finding dollars specifically for Veterans Memorial Park. And I was naive in the last conversation I had about this because the $2,900 was always what was in my head for this particular account. I didn't know that there was even a separate cash account specific for Veterans Memorial until Amy went digging and found this one. So that $2,900 was separate account, separate receipt, separate conversation altogether. That was what was left over from that task force essentially through Best of Waseca when it was dissolved and what was returned to us. So on our books, we're still dedicating a cash balance of $76,000 to Veterans Memorial, that project as a whole. So that warrants some conversation for the future or the present as well.
Was the $500 taken out of that?
No, they would have been taken out of the same account that the
The
$2,900 was received in.
and then was that rolled into this one?
It is not.
It's still separate, so there's still $1,400. Okay.
So what is the process to clean some of this up and to make this list shorter?
About 8 of these could probably go away today and no one would miss them. Some of them we have to have a separate assigned account if they're tied to a grant. And it ultimately just somewhat becomes a staging area. So there's almost, well, we'll use riparian because it's sitting there. We know what amount, we get certified an amount from the state, here's what your riparian aid is going to be for 2025. So we set up just a contra account, we would call it, in a Fund 25 that says we're going to get $75,000 and then we expense out the $75,000 in the same place just so we can record the activity. But it's net zero in terms of how it would affect the budget or the levy itself. So then we have whatever we actually spent, whatever we actually received in a given year, and whatever that resultant balance is at the end of the year, it then would move to this assigned account, cash account, also in a special revenue account. So that piece can't really change. We have to have all of those pass-through accounts and landing accounts that are tied to a grant.
Sure.
And that's really most of them.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, if you recall, where is it, that one? John Shiro was mentioning this one during his presentation. Up at the top, he had that $43,000 referenced in terms of additional trainings that they could utilize. That's what he was referring to as this chemical health balance. That's one of those ones that has just endured forever. It could go away, but court services is part of the general fund. So that's truly one that could just be consolidated into the general fund. Same with that one, probably not sheriff forfeiture, but the permit to carry, all of these things really could be part of the general fund activity in any given year. It's not necessary, bless you, to continue to carry those reserve fund balances. Same for this parks one. Both of these parks ones here, we're buying down some of these dollars right now. Not a reason for them to endure.
The MPCA, is that added to ever? Is there state or federal monies coming into that?
I'd have to look the last time that we added to that.
And what are the guidelines for spending that?
Fair question. Don't have those in front of me for that particular fund. Oftentimes the answer to that, as it is with many of these, is depends on what dollars got put in there.
Is that set aside for like a cleanup fund?
Well, that's what I was wondering, I know that it would be separate, once again, and it's already completed, but when we pulled the fuel tanks out at the fairgrounds.
Yes. I don't think we're required to have that escrow amount at all at this point.
I'm wondering if it's tied to the landfill.
Yeah, I don't think that we have any more commitments through that decommissioning process either, though.
I wouldn't know, but I mean, I think of the landfill when I think of
Right.
what MPC am I worried about here.
Yeah, makes sense. Similar thought here, like we have this large escrow balance in P and Z all pertaining to solar farms and solar panels. So I just pulled all of that out as disposable or spendable. It's kind of a murky one too. This Blue Creek one could go away. A lot of these, as I said, can really just be captured or consolidated in the general fund activity year to year. Recorder tech, recorder compliance, we're spending down some of these in 2025. I don't have a placeholder there for that, but both of these on average earn about $30,000 to $33,000 every year, and it's generated on recording fees. So that $46 recording fee that anyone pays for filing any document, part of that is split out into these two accounts. You could argue that both of them statutorily have outlived their usefulness many years ago. Regardless, it's still codified in law. So there's Recorder Technology Fund, which the auditor treasurer has discretionary spending power over, and then there's the Recorder Compliance Fund, which only the county board has discretionary spending authority over. We've talked about both of these at times in the past, but typically when we just come and want to spend money out of them. So Recorder Technology, we usually at least program some anywhere from $30,000 to $45,000 a year in the last few years, buying some of the balance down. We pay for our record system out of it currently, which is around $30,000 a year. So it's just more aggressively buying down a couple of these balances. So they're not huge dollars, but again, more pockets of funding that are sitting out there that could be used that aren't really being used effectively at this current moment.
Michael, on the permit to carry,
Yeah,
some of that funding can be used for the administrative assistant's salary.
okay,
It might be just something to help bring the levy down a little bit more, just tie that into that.
good idea.
There's a certain percentage that can be, you just gotta figure out that percentage. I think when we were doing, we were figuring about, $20,000
Okay,
out of that.
I'll look into that.
Because that 120-some thousand, that's just fees?
That's just fees.
What do they use?
A lot of that comes into you by the permits to purchase that you have to buy from the state that you have to fill out to give to everybody, and then some of the equipment that goes along with that. Technically, it's supposed to be there if you're ever sued, you can pull the money from that fund and help offset that cost. If somebody takes you to court and you lose, you have to pay their attorney fees and stuff.
Okay.
I think we've only lost one, and that was 2018.
What was their claim?
I denied a permit to carry, and he took me to court because of I knew his criminal activity that was happening, and they were found out that I didn't do enough investigation on it, so they threw it out. They just couldn't use the charges, so.
Okay.
I think it cost us $2,800.
So it's more about if you were to deny versus.
Yeah.
Couple others to mention, E911, I'd like to spend some of these dollars down. I haven't got a final direction on where the sheriff is taking this one currently. But the dispatch control modules and equipment that we recently purchased, so it would be fair to put about $178,000 placeholder in this one to buy that down. Because we should if we have eligible expenditure that we can utilize there. Just put that in there for sake of talking about it. And the equipment fund, vehicle fund, there is about $250,000. I think that we will end up going with, again, pending an additional conversation, but if that's the case, we'll reduce that one by $250,000 for 2025 as well.
That had to do with Brian's last proposal.
No, this is the sheriff's fund here. So this would be 3 squads built out, or maybe it was 4. The conversation being that it's a new model, we can't use any of the existing equipment, so it'll be a little bit more front-loaded as we start to rotate out some of the squads. So the conversation with Brian, I mean, nothing on this list touches that, but I had cut out 2 of the initially asked for 3 trucks in that equation. There could be some argument, and the one was a van, the old veteran services van that we still use for maintenance vehicle. That was the only one that I left in there to swap out.
Didn't the sheriff had money left, but isn't the public safety money different than his vehicle assigned fund?
Oh, yes, you're right.
Okay.
Public safety. This should be the public safety aid, not
Yes.
equipment.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I called that the wrong thing.
Because you were gonna purchase body cameras and tasers out of that fund, right? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, so in 2023, there was a combination of fund balance for vehicles being used in conjunction with the $368,000 for public safety aid. 200,000 of that was the handheld radios. We had 30 handheld radios that were supposed to be purchased, the body cameras, as you mentioned, the equipment to download and store that data as well. And I think all of that was going to be through Motorola. It was supposed to be all tied together with what our dispatch equipment was going to be as well. Dispatch equipment was part of that purchase. Taser replacement as well, that were over 10 years old. So between the 2 of them, and I think the only one that has moved forward really is the vehicles. Yes, we have acquired vehicles. We have acquired the snowmobiles and trailer, and at least ordered the dispatch piece. We know that there's a delay there from Lumen in that actual transition over to that new equipment. So that's not something we're holding up or can do anything about at this point. But I have not heard anything definite on body cameras or squad cameras or tasers or radios.
We did have an assigned radio count.
I don't think there's anything in the assigned radio count at this point. I'm aware of.
Do you know what that funding got used for?
Unless it's hiding somewhere.
Because there should have been almost $200,000 in there, I think, 22.
22.
This here, that's
Let me ask on that one.
final budget variance from final
As I'm finding, there's a little bit of nuance with these reports, like
budget. Underspent.
the first time I asked for just a wide casted net for this particular purpose, none of these were on there. That's why they look a little bit differently. So, and that goes back to how they were coded with the OR code and the object code itself in history. So we have to grab, 75% of the total picture and then have to go digging for some more of it too. So good
Right there.
answer on that
And
radio.
that AG is above at 160, that National Radio Board. Is that not right?
I don't know, what the National Radio Board, what was that one?
Right above LPCA. NRBG.
No, natural resource
No,
block grant.
yeah.
That's what that is. There was, yeah.
And it's possible that it is
Yeah, it could be.
an 01 dot.
You could have moved it into something else at the time. I didn't think we had a big purchase of radios, that's why I was wondering.
We have not. I know I'm trying to remember what, I guess it's sticking out of my head that we potentially used that for the workstations at that point in time, when we redid the dispatch room and workstations and added that workstation in the lower level. That's what's sticking out of my head that we utilize those dollars for, but I'll confirm that.
Pulled all that out of 911.
Okay.
Should have came out.
And I don't think anything's really been utilized out of 911 in recent history. So it could have been a situation where it pulled the money out of that fund and maybe should have pulled it out of the 911 fund. So I'll find it. Shouldn't be too hard to figure out.
The riparian aid fund.
Uh-huh.
How many dollars comes into that each year?
75, 76.
So that'll grow by 75.
Yes, and we'll also use some dollars. We're budgeting programmatically now every year using those dollars, assuming that we'll continue to get those dollars. Everything we're being told from the state is they're not going anywhere. So it could go away at some point in the future, but.
But is there money coming out of that for maintenance of those buffer strips then too?
There are, but that hasn't been a huge ask
No.
any given year. It's $10,000 or less.
It'd be nice if we could use some more of those dollars in the repairs on those ditches
County
to
ditches.
reduce the impact on the constituents.
Well, if it's done right, we can use one water, one plan on some of that. That's what Blue Earth County just
If the
did.
Lord doesn't want to steal it all.
Well.
They're getting the projects on the ground.
We have to
Yeah.
get more aggressive on asking for it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of out of our hands a little bit.
It is, although they did add staff. They've got another tech there now. So they've got 2 techs. But
So we'll see if they, they haven't
She's
asked
brand
for
new.
any money from the Canon yet. We haven't gotten a single project out of that yet. And I know that the director out there has asked Mark to submit some projects.
Lesueur County, Waterville is gonna be looking for upstream water storage, which includes Waseca County, to deal with some of this flooding from Waterville, because that's the Whitewater subwatershed that goes in, subwatershed of the Cannon that flows into Waterville. And so there are things coming whether Mark does anything or not, or whether SWCD staff at all do anything. There's going to be some outside forces that make some things happen there, but yeah.
And as far as the cover crop asks,
There's lots of funding in one watershed plan for that.
and I think that needs to be more, that's why I'd like to kind of tighten up that riparian money when the ask comes from SWCD for riparian money for the cover crops. It's gotten so loose and we kind of just give it away because we got it. I'd like to see more of that money be asked to one watershed, one plan.
And to save our riparian dollars for
Other things.
other things.
So I mean, we can be more aggressive in just buying down the levy as well too. We can't be, we're only capturing $25,000 of the $75,000 for what we could call levy buy down, offsetting staff wages.
Administrative.
So we're taking a third of it every year right now and transferring it in. So if you look in land and water resources, for example. And that's horrendously small.
So are we thinking that our reserve funds are at like 46 or 45% this year? Is that my understanding from the audit?
Yeah, so 46% is what I expect to see our general fund reserve balance to be in the 2023 audited financial statements, not inclusive of what we're looking on right now in the spreadsheet.
And you'd like it to be around 42%. Or 43.
I would be comfortable much less than that.
So if we put it back to like at a 30 or 40%, 40%.
I can speak boldly because Tammy's not here to give me dirty looks, but yeah.
So if we offset our increases in our levy by just our assets that we have right now, that would not have to worry a big bunch on our citizens, constituents, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, the 6%, we went from 39 to 45. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So that 6% is, what's that dollar figure?
6 times.
Pull this back up here. And that's the analysis I was giving you here.
Okay.
So budget expenditure, blah, 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 46. I would suggest that allows for roughly 1.1 million of accessible cash to buy down either one-time expenses, programmed expenses, or levy targets.
So that 6% represents about that 1.1 million.
Yes.
And what would that give us for a percentage of a levy increase? Anything? Or would it just kind of keep us even?
So 1.5%, your 1.5% increase for over last year is $266,000.
It could be a negative 10.
Well, I don't necessarily think we need to be there, but
No.
And that's exactly why I put this analysis in there and why I further said, we're not even talking about 2024 yet. And it gets even more stark when you look at that last sentence, like this 1.1 million, I'm saying I'm anticipating that to replicate itself to the tune of 1.2 million in 2024. So all things left as they are right now, I would expect our general fund balance to increase again by another $1.2 million when we're having this conversation next year at this time, based upon our 2024 audited financial statements.
Okay, gentlemen. When does the Justice Center come into this conversation?
well, I think the Justice Center, I think, like I proposed, I think we need to have a review of that. It was just a smaller deal. Just have the architects come so we can have a discussion. Maybe, I don't know, the work group or some group maybe. Just-
I have no reservations about that at all. When you look at where we're at here, whether it be known to us or not, it seems we've positioned ourselves in a spot where we can look at an improvement in county facilities that will have little effect on the levy and still have a 50-year impact on the services we can provide Waseca County.
When you say smaller jail, Commissioner Milbreath, what enlighten me?
I think, generally speaking, the first proposal was a 30-bed jail. 32 something.
32.
And I think if we decrease that down, make our facility more user-friendly with only 10 to 12 beds. Because generally, we are averaging.
We're averaging 9-7 a day now. That's the average.
Well, that's the old, if you look at it, we've been doing about 11.
I understand, but his average is 9-7. So if you put up a 10 bed, you don't have enough and you're already shipping them up.
Right.
So I don't see how that helps us.
It's just looking to the future to have a facility here. I guess just looking so you're not spending a lot of time running around. I think if we look at going outside our county to house individuals, I would like to see some certain stipulations put into that. Will they take our staff on without having to rehire? Will they be coordinated with our reports? They have everything.
I think that's some language that we need to put together.
You know, and the booking process, had a conversation with the local sheriff, and he said for $150,000, for $150 a day, minimum of 10 beds, he would do everything.
Which direction was that?
Comes to the west.
And I don't mean to derail the conversation that we need to have here this morning, because that's what we're doing here. I'm taking you down a rabbit hole. But regardless of what we would build, I think we're in a position to build. And I think the analysis of what we build and staff going forward is still, that's a whole different conversation. And I appreciate you guys jumping right into the nuances, but I don't want to derail Michael's time with us
I
here.
understand that.
But just to say, I think that we have to keep that idea in these ongoing budget conversations, because we are poised to be able to do that and to be able to think long-term right now for the county. As long as we keep that in mind. If we don't keep that in mind, that opportunity is going to go away. And maybe we want it to go away, I don't know, but.
Can we, with our general fund, can we just keep that money in there just enough to take our levy down and just keep that money building and be able to utilize that further down the road to offset, let's say we do a building and we can throw a big chunk down payment into it?
Yeah, so touching on both things, I mean, this is where I want the conversation to go, so
Okay.
you're not derailing my thoughts.
All right, awesome.
You're just
Hated to drag you down a road you
Just
didn't
reading
plan to
that.
go down today.
reading it. And on that note, I have to apologize on this. I just realized that the Fund 37 one wasn't on there. And there's $1.5 million in Fund 37, which is capital infrastructure. So I added that to the top line here so you can look at it. But that's that $750,000 placeholder that's been in there since 2022. Okay, so that'll go up again this year. So it'll be 2.25. All specific to jail or judicial center conversations. That's part of the buy down. But you're speaking on, Commissioner Medway. All that to say that whatever you want to accomplish in terms of levy goals is attainable for 2025. I have almost complete comfort in whatever direction you go in. I just want there to be somewhat of a measuring stick, so to speak, for that path forward, which is why I provide you this information, that forecast, to talk about where did you come from and where are we going here. You've made tremendous strides over the last 5 years. Even at a 1.5%, you're making tremendous strides. And every single year you figured out how to beat that inflation picture and not reduce services, but in a lot of places actually enhance services. So anytime you see that budget ratio growing is a good thing when the budget is growing, commensurate to the levy. That's okay.
Do you have that one handy that compares us to other counties?
Yeah.
Because when you talk about where we want to be as a county and where are we satisfied, and then to me, when we can start getting closer to what Dodge County is levying their constituents, or Brown County is levying their constituents, when we're more in that mix that are similar counties and still have excess funds, that's when I get more comfortable about
My big thing is, we shouldn't be holding on to constituents' money if we don't have a reason to hold on to it. I mean, if we're planning a project like our Justice Center, okay, we can justify hanging on to a little bit more than, but if we don't have a reason, there's no reason for us to take it.
Right. No, I'm good.
Yeah, no disagreement here, obviously.
But
Yeah, and that's why I'm trying to convey that the county, from a state net position standpoint, is in the best place it has ever been. And that's a great thing, but it gives you a lot of flexibility with what you want to do and how you want to see it happen. You know? So it's,
So if you go down to Dodge, we're down to like populations as us.
okay, let's sort of go with this
We
first.
scroll down. We got Martin County. They're levying a lot more than us. They're really, but you look at Dodge County is 16.5, we're 17 million, and they've got more population. Brown is 25,000 people and they're levying 16.5 million more, less than us. They've got New Ulm, well, I suppose they got just more tax base with New Ulm.
They have more tax base, but it's also the relationship of human services and how that formula works out. They have 75 human services staff, which seems like a lot, sounds like a lot.
But that's both public health and human services.
It is, but also, you know, we've kind of had that discussion before too, that we're just paying a levy amount. In theory, we should, in our minds, say, well, it should be the same because Min Prairie as an organization is benefiting from the commensurate revenues to the expenses on a per person basis. Again, state and federal programming, the aid amounts. We talk about like, okay, roughly 50% of this FTE is paid by whatever program funding they're working within. But we don't see the full effect of that coming back to us either.
Because we just pay levy, we don't see
We just pay levy, and it's overall a much larger organization than what Brown County is working with.
it seems like they remain flat and they're trying to catch up.
Their human services, I have that, I can try to find it, is not the 3.3 million we're paying
22
for human
23
services.
Yeah, they did. That's what I'm wondering.
And I know they did,
If there was a
they made a big jump in 24 again too.
Yes, and there will, and which is why I've said before, looking at this analysis, you're gonna see some shifts in 2025, for sure.
Phil's
Some more conversations in there.
County has got a low levy. And when Doug is done, I'm sorry, yeah.
15,000 people.
But I mean, those are, you try to compare and no doubt we've made huge strides over the last 3-4 years, in allowing these other counties to catch up to us.
Yeah, maybe they're looking at us and trying to catch up, you know, instead of us trying to catch up with them.
Sure.
You know, there's two sides of it.
Houston, you know, you look at Houston County, but that's a whole different, well, not a whole different. But look at how low their levy is.
It's interesting and it's tough to compare when you get into some of these counties that have a lot of small cities. You typically will see the county levy lower and that burden, the tax burden may not be any different at all.
total
But it's-
tax burden.
Yeah, sure, but it's spread more commensurate among all of those individual cities that are doing more of that preventative type maintenance on a broader scale, bigger area. That definitely does happen. Fillmore could be a good example of that too. So it doesn't invalidate looking at the levy amount as a placeholder. It's certainly relevant, but the actual county makeup, municipal makeup within the counties does make a difference to the county levy. So it will be interesting to fill this out in 2025 when we get the preliminary levy information and see where it's moving, because I think you'll see some shifting of positions.
So when we're done, almost done talking about this, I would like to get into the conversation about the monumentation. And that's being done in Wilton Township. And if you could go back to that prior list that you had.
This one?
Yeah, it just got me thinking, Wilton Township is doing the monumentation now. And that was through a grant. And I would like to move forward with either, if there was a fund there that we could take some money out of, or create another fund to create a resource that if there was a private individual that came forward that needed survey work done and to find those monuments, if they had a variance, if they were doing something through P&Z and they needed to find, a farmer wanted to do a new bin setup, or if he was selling a 40, they needed to find those survey points. Well, then they would have to pay to get that done. And I would, we got the grant for Wilton to find them all, but I'd like to move forward, finding more grants for doing that. But in the process before that, if we could put a reserve, a resource fund, like a 50-50 match, and put money into that account. So when they had to get their survey done and find those points, that it could be a county match or a private individual match for those funds to save the constituent dollars in doing the survey. That way they would be updated, those monument points would be updated to, and recorded for future use. Because they're not, if we did a broad spectrum of the whole township, not all those points get used every 30 years, 25 years, 50 years. They might be out in a slough or something like that. But at least you would have some of them updated throughout the whole county. That make it, so if there was a fund, if I came in and said, I got a survey of my farm, or I want to do a different bin site, I don't know where my monument points are. They might be in the back corner by the three-legged rock underneath the pine tree that's leaning to the right. I think it's there, but you still have to have Jones Haugen Smith or Bolton May come out and take a look. And that cost the constituent dollars. So if we put a fund, I'd like to put a fund away, some dollars away each year, or just do it as a pilot year to see, to do like a 50-50 match. The county it would only cost you half as much to get that survey done. Do you understand?
I do. And I'm thinking about that as part of it is I don't know enough about, because when someone pays for a survey, they have bought the right to that information. Your model is suggesting that because the county is matching with an individual landowner, that then the county could have access to that information and make it part of our GIS.
Yeah.
Well, the points that they find to do their survey will be, then we can record them as if they would be.
Yes, absolutely.
That way the county could look at it.
We
the
can
county
go ahead,
could probably-
And I don't disagree. You know that I was excited about getting this grant because I do think our GIS system, Travis works hard on it, really hard, but it is not as accurate as we would like it to be for property owners, for sure. I think the devil is gonna be in the details in that, as far as, can we do that? Can we require that if we provide matching funds from people? And then some of it's gonna come down to, do we have the capacity to use that information, to get it in there? Because it sounds super easy to say, just stick it in there, Travis, it'll be fine.
Well,
And I don't know if that's the case, because, I mean, I visited with Esri when I was at NACO. They've got some interesting new programming that is able to do some correcting on some of these property lines already that I don't know how much it costs, and those are technical issues that could happen. Then the question becomes, do we have the staff capacity to do that? And guys, we can see that we have, previous renditions of this board have done a more than ample job of making sure that we have some resources stuck away all kinds of different places. We have always, we don't like to borrow money, so this is where we're at, but we also don't like to hire people. And if we want to do a really good coordinated job of that, you got to hire people, because you got to have enough capacity to do the work too.
Hold it here.
So
What did I miss? How did we get to hiring staff?
I'm just saying, I like the idea, but I'm not sure we have the staff capacity to do that.
And we don't need more staff capacity.
but you have Jones Haugen Smith doing
Yeah.
Wilton Township. So they're doing all the work, correct?
I
And
think
they're
that,
recording it in the recorder's office.
I think the key question will be, it's statistical, first of all, or it's also statutory. By providing matching funds, is that going to get us the legal right to that information? And can we require that it does? That's my number one question. Number two, do we have enough citizens doing surveys to get us where we want to be at that point? And even if it's 2 or 3 a year, you know, we want to budget thoughtfully about how much we put toward matching funds then. I mean, I don't have any idea how many surveys get done here in a year. I don't know. You know, if there is no statutory obligation, if somebody who has had a survey done can require or can provide those coordinates to Waseca County already for all the surveys done in the last 15 years, then our map could improve exponentially just by saying, you know, if you've done a survey in the last 15 years and you're willing to provide that information to Waseca County, we could greatly improve our services to you. Don't we start there?
Well, they're all being recorded at this point if the surveyor is following the law. So we should be able to access that data now. There's just a disconnect between.
Can we use it though in our map?
So, I mean, it's a legally recorded and prescribed document. It's not private information,
Okay.
I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's nothing proprietary or private about it.
I mean, we've just never linked those two things together.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you were to do something like what Commissioner Kraus was talking about, where we have this fund to help get these surveys, which could eventually help us find more points. Will that give us any trouble applying for more grants. That we're already investing, we have to tell them that we are setting aside this amount of money for this kind of help.
Sometimes that gets you the grant because you've shown a commitment to the work already.
So it could be an advantage to them.
I was just looking for the 50-50 match because that has some, now they gotta put some work into it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
They have some ownership to it. If it was free,
Everybody has to do it.
everybody do it.
Everybody's gonna come and ask to get
You
their
know,
land.
you know,
I think you can get a disclosure, for the data back, if you're providing money, we're gonna give you this fund, but you're gonna have to provide this back to us. Just a legal document.
Those are just the things
I'm just
going
throwing
around
it
in
out
my
there.
head, and I am so excited about Wilton, and I'm excited that we might be able to do more. I'm not disagreeing with the effort. I'm just, some of the things swirling around in my head right away.
But it's just county dollars that we have that's being returned to the public,
Better service.
better service.
Off the topic, why does our map all of a sudden have boxes of different colors on it? Our county map.
Oh,
I mean, if you wanted to do something, I was gonna trust what you're talking about.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
I understand.
It's like the master server highlighted or something.
Yeah, we got two that you were.
There's pink ones, there's blue ones.
Purple.
Yeah,
And then everything is certified up to date. Because I read it.
yeah. I thought it was cool, and I tried to figure out some rhyme or reason when I was on it the other day.
Let's,
I haven't seen that yet.
reel it in and get back to
Yeah.
the budget stuff. Michael, can
Thank
you
you,
pull
Chair.
a 7/29 email that you sent out for extension, please, and go through that? I just want to, I have a question on that one. And I still have a question on the public health, $200,000 increase. I just want to see how this is factoring in. And I know we talked about extension when we were at the district meeting.
Yeah.
Commissioner Walker. I want to know how I suppose you have a lot more emails from 7/29 than I do.
Yep, sure do.
Sorry.
So this one,
I believe it was sent out to the commissioners
Okay,
on the extension breakdown.
I got you.
Oh, I can find that too.
The actual proposed
So I'll
budget.
look at the budget memo.
Yeah.
Sure.
There we go.
Maybe the side by side.
Go
More help.
to the left one, I believe, all the way there. So the wages part-time
Let's think about it.
removed. The full-time removed or not there yet, admin staff support. And then when you get down to tech services, it doubled from 24 to 25. And what was the ask there, Commissioner Moulton?
That was a university coming with, because we have a new MOU with them
Right,
about memorandum of understanding about what we're gonna pay,
right.
because they set that at the state level for all extension
Okay,
employees.
so it was set at the state level. Okay,
And some of the other things our extension committee does have control over, but the wages that get paid and the benefits, that's state contract.
But we can set the FTEs.
We can set the FTEs, so we can decide not to have a full-time person.
Well, it's requesting an additional half-time person
Correct.
altogether
Yes.
Right.
and an additional 400 hours for summer staff.
right.
I'll send you an email that I requested information from Christie about why that we needed it at 1.5.
Okay.
I just sent it to you now, I just got it today. So
Oh,
it explains,
okay.
it goes through and explains why the 0.5 is needed. And I also asked her about the increase in the pricing for everybody in the state increased that because they're trying to keep up. We had a discussion about, well, they get paid this much, so we're leaving extension to go work for them. So they're trying to keep their people, so.
What about, see, part I'm struggling with is, okay, you're adding 0.5 and you're adding 400 hours. So that's 10 weeks at 40 hours. So why do you need both?
Kids in summer help.
Yeah, but you're adding that too.
Right.
So you're really adding one all summer, the busy time.
I should clarify, I think there's already 360 hours in the contract. I think the increase is
Oh,
40 hours.
that's not an additional
I
4.
don't think that's all additional.
All right, that makes a difference.
I'm pretty sure 360 is, yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Summertime casual from 360 to 400.
But the addition of the 0.5 FTE.
And the increase in salaries. It was like a 30-some% increase, wasn't it?
I emailed Christie this morning as well, asking when she would, of the next several Tuesdays, when she would be available to come and walk through this with the board team. That was before I knew this email, so this probably will certainly add some of the details there too. I haven't read this yet. I mean, when I first sat down with her in, I think, May, when we saw the draft of this MOA, we had a bunch of questions too, mostly around the salary increases and the methodology, but similar mentality there. It's like, it's not me, Christie, making a request necessarily. This is the state policy or how they approached it with their educators as a whole.
So the summer temp casual position is going from 9 weeks to 10 weeks, basically.
So that's being pushed out from the state, telling us that this is what you need, figure out how to pay them.
The extension educator, that is the case. Because she gets paid according to what the state tells us we have to pay. The other ones are our choice about how much we want to do with that and how much support we want to give that extension educator.
That's the 0.5. That's the 0.5.
That's the 0.5. And the summer intern.
In years past, we always said we had volunteers to do that, like Dirk and Peters used to do it.
There's still a ton of volunteers that do
Right.
work for extension, I mean, especially during fair time.
So how are they spreading out that money then? I mean, how do you, if you're gonna volunteer, or you have 4 volunteers and what, 2 or 3 of them say, well, I'm just volunteering because I don't. want anything."
No, the volunteers, they aren't in this
Okay.
equation. They just come and they just serve.
And, well, and then you have the board that gets certain, they get per diems to show up as well.
You also have to, just for clarification, remember that we still hire a staff person in addition to this, what you're seeing here.
And that's not in that.
This is not part of this number.
Where's her wage then?
In general fund.
Just in the general fund?
So this, line item on here for U of M extension has both. That would have both Sarah and the professional and technical services contract. Okay, let me just pull up. Okay, this is So this is our county extension budget as a whole. So when you look at 2024, it's about $100,000 increase is what we're anticipating currently for county extension as a whole. This one right here, this line, that's Sarah on the screen. That's
Our county
that's
employee.
Our employee benefits, and then this is under professional, the conversation now is under professional and technical services, which is a 1.5. FTE and summer staff hours of 400 as well. So we don't call them employees in our budget, it's the contract, it's the technical services agreement, the value of that MOA.
So that went up 80,000 and then the 2 staff went up 100,000. So I mean, are we talking 180,000 total?
100,000 total. So you look at this top line, this was the budget for 2024.
Okay.
This is the current budget, levy impact, I should say, not budget, levy impact for 2025. So 96,000.
Okay.
But why is that regular full-time so low? At 50.
Because it doesn't include any of the benefits, those are listed further down.
Yeah, this is the base wage, and that's the correct base wage, but
Because that's just Amy.
Sarah, not Amy.
That's just Sarah.
Amy is the
Amy is
159,000.
part of this.
Yeah,
Sarah Henniker is our employee,
Yes.
who's here every day,
And that's Amy,
regardless of whether Amy's here or not, Sarah is.
4H Amy.
yes.
4H Amy.
yeah, Amy and who else?
The part-timer, well, it's figured in
The 0.5.
The 0.5 doesn't exist yet.
And the 0.5 doesn't.
So that 80,000
Didn't
was
include
Amy
the 0.5.
in 2024
And
That's basically
360 hours.
and the 300 something. 360.
And the 2025 represents the increase in percentage on Amy's salary as well,
Right.
Yes.
Plus the.
In that MOU,
plus the 0.5.
the new MOU, yeah.
Yeah, it was like a $20-some thousand increase, I think, just in the salary piece and then everything else.
But that 20-some thousand was also part of that 400 hours.
No,
Wasn't just Amy. Just Amy got a 20-something $1,000 raise. Nice little bump.
They did the analysis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's hard to swallow.
yeah.
so anyway, I emailed Christie this morning saying we should be able to walk through the MOA and some of the logic there because it's not mine to defend. Email's helpful though, so thank you for sending that.
Did you send it to all of us?
I did.
Okay. Thanks for getting that.
Oh, and that has to do with the power
So,
produce.
like, it's what-
I don't understand. Nobody likes to spend money.
let's go.
Well, I want to be respectful to your time. We can certainly continue the conversation. You just have to tell me when you want to quit or what you don't want to go into today. We can go back to the overall philosophical question that we were talking about before in terms of where we're landing and why you want to land there and what dollars you want to use. I do have just a very small footprint of reserve dollars or assigned fund dollars being captured today. As I mentioned, in green, it's indicating is in reserve. That doesn't necessarily mean general fund reserve, and in most cases it doesn't at all.
It's some of the special funds that you're talking
Yeah, exactly. So parks is a piece of that, you know, and parks really is just the land sale revenues that came in. That's not even one that was on that spreadsheet yet. So it's immaterial really in terms of that conversation, because it's just capturing the revenues and putting them right back in to buy down those investments into that program. P&Z is the LATCF dollars that I already mentioned. Offsetting Tina. IT, I have a chunk of recorder technology, a chunk of recorder compliance, and then I want to say $75,000 of reserve, general fund reserve.
What's the license bureau increase? They're 37%, what is that one?
Just what's anticipated for staff.
Staff, okay.
And our staff estimates right now are higher than we would assume, as hopefully is our insurance. This one will change just based upon the turnover of employee, just from a tenure standpoint and earnings standpoint. So it'll be less than that for a certainty. And I hope more based upon what our insurance renewals. We're supposed to hear within the next 2 weeks what our insurance renewal estimate is going to be. We anticipate immediately going back out to market as well based upon that. So we can still hope for the best there. We have a 25% increase budgeted right now.
So I guess my question to you is if we set our budget at 0.5, how much would we need to take out of the reserve fund to offset that?
So I mentioned earlier, 1.5% in real dollars is 267,000. Well, let me just pull up my other spreadsheet. That's going to be more helpful as it speaks to this.
About 180,000 per percentage.
Yeah, in terms of percentage. But I include some of that info there is in your summary as well too, but that's kind of why I put that chart in there. That the various breakpoints at those dollar amounts in terms of increase from last year, 0.5% increase in real dollars is $89,000. Just using that as the measuring stick. So there's already likely some implied hopeful savings if our health insurance is a little friendlier, depending upon where union negotiations go, what that lands at. We'll know that probably by the beginning of October, but that's after the preliminary is approved, so we tend to aim high in union negotiation years because we can't go up, we can go down in December. So that's usually the methodology we employ there.
So if a lot of our unknowns right now drop what we anticipate, could we actually settle with a 0% increase and would we be able to cover expenses plus the needs of the wants over 2025?
Yes.
Okay.
Because that 1.2 million that you're expecting 23 to be under budget,
24, yeah.
or 24, I'm sorry.
Yep, and that 1.2 million is the entire premise of those wish list items I was talking about earlier.
Okay.
That's how do
Pushing
we,
some of them up.
yeah. So we don't have to talk about them next year or the year after. For more levy sustainability and utilizing the additional revenues we have now to do so. That's the concept there. Even amidst that, even if we spent $1.2 million more than we're budgeted in 2024, there still would be plenty of strategic initiative to accomplish what you were just saying.
This is, and maybe I'm not following the numbers right, but that's okay. If we had a 0% and we used our reserve funds, where would that leave us on our reserve percentage?
Oh, sure. So in 20, let's just talk about 2023, I guess, with that 46% general fund. And are we just talking general fund right now?
Yeah.
Is that easier?
Yeah.
So 46% is our general fund reserve for 2023 activity. Utilizing, let's say you wanted a 0% levy, that was the threshold, we pulled $267,000 out of that general fund reserve. It's still in excess of basically 45%. So it doesn't really do anything in terms of the general fund reserve, nor does it even consider 2024 activity yet.
Okay.
So it's still a comfortable position in my mind, regardless of how.
It's just if something devastating happens in 2024, to make sure that we have some funding there to, besides our 39%.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, that's, when you talk about the capital infrastructure that we've been banking, trying to buy down levy thresholds or benchmarks levy, assuming we bonded debt. I mean, those monies are there, currently accessible and not being utilized. If the worst case scenario materialized, we've encountered a $1 million expense that we weren't anticipating. That funding is there outside of the general fund picture even. So it's a comfortable scenario all around still, no matter how you look at it. If you told me that we're going to be at 0%, I'm not going to lose sleep over that. It's just why I keep going back to that 20-year picture. It's, to me, it's more about what's the target than any individual year. Where are we trying to get to and why, which allows me to make some of those decisions much easier. If it's not just the year-by-year analysis, the year-by-year conversation, but like we were looking at earlier, well, we want to be a lower levy per capita than this county or this range of counties. We want to be in line with this range of counties. Fine, that's a target, right? So we can work towards that. And that allows me to know how do I need to shift some of these resources around going forward. Because staff aren't ever going to get cheaper. That's obvious.
Well, you
That's
know,
the hole in the wall you've seen.
what was this?
Right there.
In the door. Yeah. You know, to make us in line somewhat with the other counties, that's fine, but each county has their own agendas and stuff they want to accomplish. So to get right on board and say, yeah, we want theirs the same as theirs, that isn't always a factual thing that we can do.
No, I 100% agree with that. And that's why I just kind of give them a clarification when first coming in here, the feeling and statements to me were, we're too high, our taxes are too high. Why are they so high? How does it compare? And it, just like in our own market study that we do, you have to give the appropriate caveats necessary to make sure we're comparing apples to apples, because we're often not, but it's often as close as we can get. And then you have to add your own county philosophy to this is what we're trying to accomplish. Because it's not all just data on the screen, it's the services that are actually being done and provided on a daily basis. And if that's working well, that's going to be more important than,
What? I'd be comfortable setting in at 1.5 in September, but I'd like to see a 0 by the time we set it in December. I think we have enough to accomplish that for the next couple of years, unless something really takes a tank somewhere.
So for review, we have money in so-called investments making 4-5%. That's upping that $1 million to 1.2 or 1.3. It's going up. We're building funds there. And we talked about buying down some of these. But we wouldn't want to buy down with those dollars that we're making. So if it's costing us 3% on some of these investments, you wouldn't want to take that money and buy down at 3% or pay off that, correct?
Well,
You wouldn't want to do it that way. You would want to do it out of those fund reserves that we have in that other list.
so interest revenues are general fund reserve.
That's general fund
Yeah,
reserve.
so the 1.1 million increase in reserve balance in 2023 largely attributed to investment earnings. The 1.2 speculated for 2024 largely attributed to investment earnings. So that when I talk about expediting some of those expenses, it really is talking about utilizing additional interest earnings over and above budget, because we know we can't create the house of cards of saying, we're gonna earn 1.5 million in interest, and then next year it all goes away, and we have to figure out how to cut $1 million out of the budget.
Right, I'm just trying to capture that while it's there, because in future years, it's not going to be there.
Yeah, so the investment conversation is a unique one in and of itself, and that has to do more with our cash flows than it does with our balance, like that general fund balance. Because our investment pool will be anywhere from $28 million to $45 million throughout the course of the year, depending upon where we're at. We have 3 primary settlements that we send money out to other jurisdictions. We're the fiduciary for all of the property taxes in the county. So we benefit from that for a couple of months at a time on more of the magic fund side, which is, as of today, still yielding 5.26% on a 7-day average. So if we have an extra $12 million in our coffers that isn't our money, it's due to other governments, we're still generating daily interest on that, well, we have it, and then we send it out. That's balanced with the certificates of deposit that we have laddered out overall. We have about $3.5 million of CDs maturing this year. We have another $3.5 million that are still stuck in that awkward phase of being 2% or less in earning that we're trying to get rid of. But thus far, the banks aren't stupid either, so they increased some of the penalty rates for those longer term CDs when the market started escalating quickly. So we're at the point now that when we start anticipating a little bit of decline, not huge, not falling off a cliff, but at least a little bit of a downward trend of interest earnings over the next year, we'll start to get more aggressive in the laddered out certificates of deposit and less reliant on the liquid cash and the magic fund, and leaving the magic fund really for those due to other government dollars as they come in. And we know they're going back out. So we'll take the interest we can get while we have it. But the primary earnings, more recession-proof earnings, are going to be those 60 to 72-month issuances, CDs, that are still generating 5% plus when the market is at 3 or less.
Michael, we'll have a work session next Tuesday morning before the regular board. Do you know what you would touch on then?
Well, I'm hoping that it will be extension, primarily doing that presentation. And is there something specific you would like to go through?
We don't have an audience today. I just want to.
We already talked about Sarah, right? And Sarah was in front of us last week, correct?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah,
But we didn't really get that answer.
yeah, we talked, I think that's one of the departments that really has the most questions behind it right now, in my mind anyway. But I know that it's like human services, a lot of times you can't sure up that budget until you get closer and know where your grants are coming from.
Yeah, so the confidence I have with public health is that that number will go down. I don't know what that number is, but I know there's at least 2 sources of revenue that we don't know yet that can be factored into that. There are other sources of revenue that can be factored into it that just aren't right now. When we look at reserves and some of those other funding pools and mechanisms, when we talk about opioid dollars, there are other things we can be utilizing and we're not. We don't have an answer on cannabis revenue, and we won't until after all of this is certified for the year. So there will be some additional revenues coming in that we don't have a number or have an estimate for and can't get one. That will still buy down in 2025. So the end of the year picture isn't going to be stark in 2025. But so when we say there's questions, unanswered questions, what are those? Is it just the percentage is really big and we're uncomfortable with it, so there's questions in our mind, or are there specific questions like that we can drill down into further?
Well, I know you and I talked a little bit about just wondering how here I go comparing us to other counties again, but talking with LeSueur County, it just seemed like their levy impact was, and I gotta go back and look at the county. We were provided that about 2 or 3 meetings ago. Public health from LeSueur and public health from our Waseca.
I did some additional investigation, but they have combined health and human services, which means that what they include or don't include in their public health is different than us. For instance, they do the senior services in their public health, so they have that revenue stream that comes into their public health that in our county goes to Min Prairie.
Yeah, see, that's what gets difficult about
Yeah.
those comparisons.
So, and I only took a few minutes to look that up because I was wondering what they had there that we didn't, and that's a significant one.
Yeah, just curious if 900,000 is a lot for our size county in public health, or is that what it needs to be, you know?
Yeah, if you want that to be more of the focus of the conversation, we can gather some data around that. We would just have to, again, give the appropriate caveats as needed, because health and human services combined certainly makes a difference, especially in the administrative side of things. So they're probably not attributing administrative costs to that number, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And if you look at our picture in comparison, we're administratively heavy if you just look at it from aerial perspective, what's going on here. And those are the things that don't get really any revenue offsets anywhere.
Right, because we've got full administration for public health and full administration for human services. We're able to combine them.
Say, Michael, we pay so many dollars into Region 9, is that correct?
Well, yeah, we didn't get to appropriations yet.
And while you're looking for that, I did visit with Wilton Township on cannabis, and they are not interested. And they're passing along to.
Are they planning to come next Monday to have that discussion?
I asked them to come next
Okay.
Monday. And when I explained some to them about the cannabis, they said, they looked at each other and said, no, I don't think we need to come. So.
So they'll just sign the piece of paper essentially that says it's the county's problem.
There you go.
All right.
And they're gonna trust us with the zoning on it. Because that's the other piece, is you don't come, you're trusting us with the zoning on it.
So, yeah. And I thought Region 9 had went up at some point in time, because their new year starts in July.
Yeah, but ours doesn't start till December, so that won't make any difference between here and there.
Right.
Best way to look at these is, but let me just do this. I don't care about some of this. So when we are talking appropriations, just want, and your help is needed on a couple of these for me, is I feel like we talk about the ambulance services every year, and for whatever reason, I'm not grasping what we talked about last year. And so I know we had the one-time special payment to South Central EMS this year. Last year.
No, it was like 2 years ago, and then it was,
It's been a while.
and then it was skipped because they didn't ask for it. And I don't know what the plan is now. Are they planning to come back and ask for
You know,
county
we
appropriation?
didn't have a meeting this month, so I guess I don't know. You know, because part of that was the seatbelt fines had dropped. You know, like that was how they were supporting, so that's when they came back and asked for more funding, I think.
I think that's a discussion to have with Mark Griffith, because I know that we had the discussion that if the director feels like we should be going to our individual counties for that $5,000 or whatever it would be a year, that needs to be an ask that commissioners get at this time of the year so they can put it in if they want to do it. As opposed to, because what typically happens is you don't hear about it until December. It's like, we can't put that in now.
I'll shoot him an email and ask him.
Yeah, I think that would be
I'm just trying to
wise.
think if that EMS money that we got from the state, if that covered some of their costs too. I can't remember. If that helped the board.
The new chunk of money that got funded this year,
Yeah.
it should, but I don't know if that's enough. And Mark should be making that analysis and getting to you.
Because I know he was gonna work with New Richland Ambulance on some of theirs. They were gonna, I talked to Anthony on that, they were gonna try to push, you know, what reimbursements or funding they can get to that bill as well.
Yeah, so that ties into the Richland ambulance piece too. With the additional state funds and even outside of the additional state funds, I don't know when this one started specifically. They never asked for it. We've communicated to them. They never come back and make the ask. The implication to us in the past was it seems to just be going into the general fund. I don't really know what to do with that one. I have it at 0 right now just because I've never got any justification for why it's happening. So if you disagree, obviously that's within your prerogative to do so. Or if you want to have an individual conversation or.
Yeah, I could talk to Sarah about down there. But, so help me out on the ambulance service here in Waseca. Who are they? It isn't Mayo, it's.
North.
North. And they're the same, they also service Janesville.
Yes.
So how is that different as far as us giving money to them, not giving money to Richland for their ambulance, but not giving money to these others?
They're not municipal. They're a private.
They're private owned.
Yeah, they're private.
So okay, all right. And that Richland is the only municipal ambulance we have in the county.
Yes.
Walworth doesn't have anything.
No, they use, the Richland would be their source.
Okay,
And Janesville uses North for ambulance service. They just have the rescue squad.
okay, they do have a rescue squad, but
They do.
not an ambulance.
So then what does South Central EMS do specifically?
That's Mark Griffith. That's just what we were talking about.
Right.
They provide guidance for the ambulance services and training for them.
Training, okay. So I know I had a document, I don't have it up at the moment, but I had a document that the $2,500 was the perpetual ask, at least that they were requesting from counties. So that's what I had put in there.
Okay, so Mark got his stuff together and sent a letter out. Awesome.
So maybe,
He did send you a letter, Michael?
I don't know if he sent us a letter specific to this year, but that, I know that I've read a document or letter, and maybe that was from the previous years. I was trying to find it quick. That $2,500 was the ask in perpetuity, essentially.
I think when they were here, that was 20, I can't remember what it was. When the fines were down, they were asking for more money to help offset some of their costs. I can't remember what it was, just a.
We gave him a $5,000 appropriation, I think 2 years to help with that because, yeah, the seatbelt money has really shifted things.
And that was like a mid-year ask. That wasn't on
Yes,
the appropriations list. That was, they just came to us and asked.
I don't know why I'm remembering, one was a mid-year ask and one was I think we appropriated 1 year too, but I don't.
Oh, we did, because they were on the list, but
Yeah.
the mid-year ones.
I'll shoot him an email later today, Michael, and ask him.
Okay, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
She could
See.
Going right
Going
into
into
the
the general.
I'm trying to find what I read about
Right.
the South Central.
I want to see some kind of document or
It's going to that.
So, For Minnesota Valley Action Council,
Yeah,
that's, I'm assuming that 50,000 is the internship program.
yeah, so that
How come that's
was,
not showing up in 24?
it was two different lines.
Okay,
Yeah, it was
Okay.
just two different lines altogether, so I just combined them.
that's
It
fine.
was,
I
it was
just
part of
wanted
the
to,
budget.
I just wanted to confirm that. That's what I was thinking was the case, but.
Yeah, so I combined them on the budget summary document too, that this thing.
Yep.
Because we had a bunch of different org codes. I had Amy consolidate 4 different revenue org codes
Okay,
that were all appropriations, but just moving them all under a header and account of appropriations so that it models this and it models the actual budget line item that you see in the summary. So just more cleanup stuff that needed to happen. So it didn't actually go up at all.
Corral.
Yeah, that was a new one. That was one that I'm suggesting to you that I'm talking through. That's the music group that have been a part of the last couple of years that we're looking for some funding opportunities. They pull people, a lot of people from the county and people from outside the county. They do a couple different concerts throughout the year. Usually have Christmas and a spring one.
I was gonna say, we have a number of county employees that participate in that as well as,
3, yeah, we had 3, the last 2 performances at least. They usually meet at Grace Lutheran, and then the concert in the spring was at high school, the concert the Christmas before was at, what's the name?
Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart, thank you. I don't want to say St. John's, or I knew that was wrong.
no,
It's a no time.
wouldn't have fit in St. John's.
So that was, they were talking about, I talked to them initially too, they've gotten, they usually get a grant from Waseca Area Foundation every year, but all that they do is grant funded. So they don't get paid as directors, and they try to pay any of the musicians that come and denote their time, not the singers, but the special musicians that they bring in.
So Doug, you and Dee, do you feel that you're obligated to send that last 25 to SWTD at the end of the year? Or are
I
you
think-
still thinking about that?
Well, what I think it's gonna take a visit with them to see how they're turning out, because we'll have a good idea how they're gonna turn out for the year. And if they're turning out good and they say, okay, you don't need to pay us the second half, then I'd be more apt to accept that 60,000 if they're willing to negotiate with us at the end of each year, whether they really need it or not. But if they say, well, no, you agreed to 50,000 this year, okay, we'll pay that, but then we're gonna look at that 60,000 again and bring that down.
So that's their ask, the 60.
For 25, they're asking 63,36.
Well, yeah. Well,
You know, because last year they asked for 107, and we said, no, we'll give you 50. So this year they brought it down in their ask.
Yeah, so I didn't include the 13 because it's just pass through. We get a grant for it.
Yeah.
So I just want to give you clarity. If you looked at this document, you're like, well, this is 76. I don't include the 13 in the ask.
Okay.
And you could make that argument that the 3 for repairing is also pass through and be right to do so.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that. So they get more robust in the information of the budget itself. I would argue that it helps, I guess, or conveys anything. It's helpful. I shouldn't say it isn't helpful. It is, because it is more information and more transparency to some of the things that are happening in the background, but it doesn't do anything to change the bottom line. It doesn't do anything to factor in reserve dollars. You know, that methodology or philosophy is absent still from this process overall, it seems. So that was my biggest ask last year, is justify for me the reserve balance you have and how it makes sense based upon what you're asking the county to contribute over and above what they have contributed that you perpetually keep putting in the bank.
The last meeting, they talked about, well, they have hired a second technician. And they're talking about additional vehicles. Maybe two, at least one. They spent a lot of time talking about SUVs compared to pickup trucks.
So why would they increase two? Why would they be replacing one?
Because they have more people in the office now that need to go places to work.
Well, I guess they got that grant funded guy. So they're adding two FTEs, right? The grant funded one,
Yeah, but the grant funded one is grant funded. They,
or is it just the one?
I don't know if she's the grant funded one or if because they were talking about hiring two. Her name is Candy. It wasn't clear what she was hired under, but she has started. So maybe she is the soil health person. I don't know.
That grant fund.
It could be.
You know, I guess, I always feel like we need to be part of those conversations if they're gonna increase the size of SWCD. If we're giving them appropriations, you know, don't you? You know, it's their business, but yet they're asking us for money. So
They
we
are,
gotta be involved.
Absolutely. And then part of it becomes how much are we expecting to see from them for that compared to how, we gotta be careful. They have their own statutory board that gets to make those decisions. So how much are we in their business as far as the amount of work they're doing with the funds that we give them?
Right.
But I absolutely agree.
If we don't like it, or we don't feel like we're getting enough for our money, then we gotta start pulling back.
Well, either pulling back or putting pressure on them to do more with what we give them.
Right.
Which I think we've had both those methodologies in recent years.
And Mark did make the offer to come and chat with the board, which would be helpful in the process too. So in terms of upcoming meetings.
He did, it's like what he gives you there is basically a balance sheet. He's balancing his expenses to his revenue.
Mhm.
But can you scroll down just a little bit? You know, you got all the grant funding. And they offsets, how does he offset that, the sewer, one watershed, one plan money? That's incoming money, but a lot of that is pass-through money.
That's in if you go further up.
Well, there it is. There it is. State
It's
expenses.
just. line
So,
for line.
okay, so now it's a wash, but I asked that question and how much do they give us for administering that money?
On the other side, further up, didn't he have Balliser, Lusor, One Water? He's got that even,
Right. But
like they're not getting any
That's
administrative
what I
out of
was
it.
saying, he's just showing it as a pass-through.
yeah, and there's some, they're getting,
They should be, if they're documenting it appropriately, they should be getting.
I asked that question 2 months ago. It seemed like they had an answer for me, but they don't show it very well. He made it sound like it was pretty minimal, but I thought it was a certain percentage. I thought we were getting a fairly good sized chunk of money for administering.
I think you can, because you can take up to
Each project, is that,
I'm trying to think if there's a percent. I know on the implementation grant, it was like at least 10% could go toward administration. I don't know what the percent
I think it's that percent. So yes.
for that.
So it'd be 67,000. Could be as high as we could.
Which would be more than what they're asking for our appropriation.
And which is why I mentioned that they certainly provide a lot more information on here, but it doesn't do anything in terms of the budget, because it just, it offsets each other. State allocations and grants or revenues, and then all the state expenses.
And you don't show any difference between them as far as what they're keeping.
But all those things have some administrative benefits.
If they take it.
Right.
So I would have felt better about an income and expenditure, I mean, being at zero budget if there was a line item for some kind of balance being utilized, reserve balance being utilized in the income side of things to offset the expenditures. But because they've been hitting net zero budgets for the last 5 years and have subsequently banked.
So they took 5,000 out of the reserve and put it over there to capital investment. Because they want to start a reserve for pickup replacements and stuff like that. So that's the 5,000 I asked them to take off of our appropriation. Because I said, I don't think we need to be paying for your capital investment when you got that kind of a reserve. So they brought the ask down 5,000.
They're looking for SUVs, you know, when the sheriff gets rid of some of his to put on the auction, maybe we could just slide them over and reutilize them. I know they got a lot of miles on them, but.
Yeah, just leave the stickers on them.
Yeah.
They can drive around and maybe county sheriff.
Throw the colors up there.
But that is, because how much do you get for those vehicles when they go to auction like that?
The last ones we were getting some pretty good
Quite a
change.
bit.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Because they're big motors in them.
8, 9, 10,000. Yeah, people are really, yeah. Depends on this shit, I don't know.
They have a lot of hours on them.
A lot of hours.
I like those.
Yeah, a lot of idling hours.
From the donut shop. That's just community thought. That is what I think.
Mark should come and see us.
Okay.
Mark should come and see us. And
Do
maybe,
that.
is it just Mark or is it their board chair that needs to be here as well?
No.
I hate to do that, but realistically, Mark isn't going to tell us anything without leadership from the board chair. He's not.
Yeah.
They should be here. Should hear from them.
So some more information on public health, information on SWCD, information on extension. Anything else?
Public Works is already presented once. I don't know if there'll be much change or modifications to his.
He's gone through it again a couple of times, and I mentioned that earlier, that between the even prior to the 726 budget summary you saw, the first one, we had implemented those changes. So I have several notes of his revisions and where he was able to cut out some levy implications, certainly. There could be more, if that was important to do, utilizing reserve dollars there as well too that are accessible to public works.
If any of those, I don't know if any of those that he brought to you to bring forward were 25 budgeted or if they were further out.
None of them were 25. Soonest, nearest one was 26.
For SWCD, I will mention that the report was 10.5 hours of WACA last month.
That's pretty light, isn't it?
Well, I think it's kind of in line with what he's been doing.
Light if you compare it to maybe Haley's numbers, what Sarah, because hers were totaling more like 400 to 500 a year.
Yeah.
So, if that was consistent, or is it maybe light by comparison?
My last report will be that, looking through Minbury audit, it looks to me like we were just under 1 million under budget. So there could be as much as 230,000 coming back to us. I just took 25% of that 900 and some thousand.
913,
Okay,
I thought.
yeah, so 900,000.
And relevant talking points as well, that 662 is still sitting there, untouched.
Which could easily help us get down to that 0. So that's not in the 46%. This is a special fund.
The 0 isn't a heavy lift, and that's, what I'm saying is, what can we do to make the conversations next year and the year after that easier at the same time? Because you don't want 0 to turn into 5 or 6
Right.
next year, so we'll have a predictable measuring tool in terms of contracts, collective bargaining agreements, when those are solidified. We had requested a 3-year term. We were agreeable to a 3-year term, assuming that the dollars are right, of course. So that will still be the goal, is to have a 3-year contract. We have a new bargaining unit that we'll be working with that we haven't ever worked with before, so that'll change the dynamic a little bit, not unit, but representation, I should say. With 2 groups likely switching over to LALS, so we'll see where that goes. Anything else for today?
I got just a conversation with you and Doug after that.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.